In this section, we're going to introduce the new dynamic hierarchies. I'm going to talk about what problem they solve and how to configure them. So eShare is very much a digital twin that brings together all the information from your engineering model, and it can also go out and collect data from other systems such as PLM, ERP, bring together your documents, and this allows you to get a unified view on what's going on inside your project, bringing together your complete set of engineering information. But we like to do a little bit more with this information. We like to use the power of the software to illustrate what's going on in your project, say, for example, by shading the model using different colors representing its state, or we can use that to break or create a breakdown structure. So this means that you can use information from other systems, bring it together, and inform yourself on the state of the project so you can make decisions with confidence. Now, the hierarchies in eShare kind of have been traditionally based on model attributes. So, for example, this rich hierarchy here might start with the system broken down by isometric name, spool name, and components, and so on and so forth. We've also been able to make single level hierarchies, categorizations from external data and internal data. So the basic approach would be that you would go to your MES system, perhaps using the spool name, and you want to find out about the status of that spool, which is held inside that MES system. The MES system either has a database or an API, and we can collect that data back and either build a hierarchy or a visual style based on that information. As an example here, we've taken various hull parts out to a nesting information, and we're getting their state, so we can see whether that hull part is cut, nested, and that may give us the understanding of whether we can make changes to that area, or if it's been cut, then those kind of changes are going to be a little bit more expensive. So we'll head on to the system to see some examples of this. So here we are inside eShare. This is a very common area that I like to demonstrate inside the model. We can see that we've got a freshwater cooling system that I've just highlighted. Using a visual style, for example, we can see its current status, and that should bring in its color there. Indeed, let's just focus on the cooling water system itself. Let's hide and remove everything else, and we can see its colors. Now, here we can see actual status management. If I focus on that on the hierarchy, we can see we can get to that in detail, but if I was to look in engineering, we just simply get a long list of parts are in engineering. Now, this is a live view. Were I to click on that valve there, then let's actually take that into engineering, and we can see that updates immediately. So this is very much a live view. So this is another example of a breakdown. We're using a breakdown by grand block, and we're just focusing on the structure here. Now, some of this structure is in our nesting system, and we can see its progress. So if we just looked at the nesting info, we can see the colors shown down here. Red is fully nested, green is cut, ready to go. And again, we can drill down into this information using the hierarchy, say just based on nesting name, and we can see here we've got the individual nests, and beneath each nest we have the parts. We don't necessarily know which block these nests are part of. We would have to click on the individual parts to get access to that information. So one of the challenges with this is that it's great to have this information. It's very powerful, but the ability to take this even further is currently missing. So let's dig into that a little bit further. So as you saw in the previous example there with the nesting information, the single level classification is useful, but we want to take that a little bit further. I mean, in the ideal case, perhaps what we want to do is understanding the project by block. We would want to see the state of different parts, their nest state inside the system. We'd have to use an external categorization, and then perhaps we need to break it down by nest name to get some understanding of the individual nests involved. That might require a further classification, and then we'd actually start find the part name there. So this is the new features we've started to introduce into eShare. And this allows you a far more richer way of planning up your structure. You can now use spatial ways of breaking down the structure. We have the ability to take that classification and use that classification in a single level. And you can use your model attributes as you had before. And this makes a far more richer way of creating dynamic hierarchies. And we'll have a look at that in the next section inside the software. So now we're going to dig into a dynamic hierarchy based on the nesting, which combines multiple categorizations. So here I have one called a block and nesting status. You can see that it's already generated that. So say, for example, I wanted to focus on block 103. There is our block there. And beneath that, we can see items now which are fully nested. We have one here and not nested, which will include the equipment, for example. So now we can see that we have, say, fully nested, and we can open that, and we have a list of nests beneath there. So there is a categorization going on here, and we can now dig down into the parts beneath our fully built up structure of information on our nesting. Of course, we can still use the visual styles to get some feedback on that. So if we were looking at parts, for example, that were cut, if we just wanted to look at the cut parts, we could say just have a look at those and select those. So we know now that all of these parts within block 103 are fully cut. Equivalently, we could look at those that are fully nested. So it's very easy to track down into that information. And there are lots of more powerful examples of this once you start to, say, include ERP and perhaps planning information. So, for example, here we can look at gram blocks with various pieces of planning information. Our system is going out to build up that information. So again, we'll go into block 103. We start to have some building instruction in terms of work breakdown structures. And then we have some planning information. And we could see here we've got a category which starts to give us some warning on the late delivery of parts, say within the fuel oil system and the freshwater system. Equally, we could look at that by with respect to compartment. Again, a few moments to build up that information. It's going out into external systems. There we go. And so we could look inside the room L2, and now we have some richer information on our planning. There are no stages of construction beneath here, but here we can go into a particular area and we can focus down on that, and we have a few elements there that are in planning. So let's now have a look at how we configure this. So ultimately, we configure these hierarchies under model configuration in model hierarchies. But before I do that, I'm going to be configuring the nesting example. So what I will need for that is the nesting info, categorization data source, and nesting name. So this ultimately where this data is coming from, and it's coming from a separate server, a separate database. So let's go ahead and make our model hierarchy. So we come in here and we'll add a unique hierarchy. We'll give it a name. And we have the opportunity to do different orderings based on the original order, alphabetical, for example. And then we just go through the stage of adding levels. And we can add various amounts, attributes, categorizations, and spaces. So let's start with our ground block. Let's call this blocks. And of course, if it's not in a block, we want it to be listed. So we'll say not in block. And now we choose those attributes that we need. So blocks, we just choose those attributes there. And now we can add some categorizations. So this will be our nest status, and we can see all of the categorizations that we have available to me, various ERP information. We may have PLM, certainly planning status, various status trackers, for example. So we've got quite a lot of options to break down our hierarchy with various pieces of information. And in this case, we're going to go for our nesting info, and then we'll add another categorization, which is our nesting name. And the final level will be an attribute, which is our nest identifier. And this is just called nest identifier. There we go. We save that. And once we're completed, we will need to publish. So now we are published and we can return to the model. We need to update. And here we go with our, where we find it, our full structure of nests with our block, our states from the nesting info, our nests underneath, nest identifiers, and the actual whole parts. And say we can just focus on that one itself somewhere. There we have our two parts. So there we go. That is the new dynamic hierarchies inside eShare. Thank you very much for your attention, and please continue on with the rest of the show.